Outreach Director for the Cyber Innovation Center. And I'll kind of get a little bit more into what the CIC does here in a minute. But informal education. And we're all kind of in a space where we want to make sure we are connecting our youth and our future to the programs, to the competitions, to the opportunities ultimately that lie in front of them. So hopefully through a little bit of this program, we're going to kind of take a dive into that. Talk about how cybersecurity is connected into K-12 education, and really share what we as panelists are doing, and even kind of lean on some ideas and thoughts that each of you have for that. We'll talk about distribution models and things of that nature, and how we are reaching all of these students that are around our country. So just want to take just briefly, kind of let each one of our panelists introduce themselves. And start with Brian.
Sure. My name's Brian Etheridge. I'm not GB-CAS. GB-CAS is listed in the program as talking about cyber discovery. He wasn't able to make it, so I'm kind of filling in. I've worked as a subject matter expert on the cyber discovery program for the last, 7 years or so I feel like I can speak intelligently about it. And I was already here, for something else, so they said, sure, why not help out with this. So I worked with Kevin on this, and we'll talk a little bit about that together. For my day job, my full-time job, I am director of the Center of Teaching Excellence at Georgia Gwinnett College outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So that's me.
Okay. I'm Steve Shank. I work at Hagerstown Community College. I teach in the Technology and Computer Studies Division, networking, cybersecurity, forensics. We joined CyberWatch in 2008 and have gotten a lot of ideas from them, both formal and informal, and we'll share some of the informal ideas today.
Great. And so since we're in a small group, kind of like to know who our audience is and who our topic are. So if we can go around the room, just real quickly introduce yourselves and say who you're affiliated with, what school system or company that you're connected to.
I'm Carol Garrett, and I work at Hagerstown Community College as well in the cybersecurity department.
And I'm Eddie Hall. I'm a high school counselor at Lackey High School in Charles County.
I'm Lori Dobbs. I'm the media specialist at Newmarket Middle School in Frederick County.
Okay, great. So we got a nice diverse group here. Middle school, industry, middle school to high school to community college to industry. So that's great. That's great. So really kind of just, again, kind of go over the objectives here. I want to dabble in a little bit of middle school, a little bit of high school, but spend most of our time on discussing what programs are out there to offer students, both from the perspective of high school and middle school, but also from the community college level, and how you guys can get involved and tailor your programs to welcome those rising up high school students to dual enrollment and things of that nature. So if you don't mind, maybe advancing the slide.
Sure.
I'm going to quickly kind of go through. We can go one more. Here we go. So a little bit about the Cyber Innovation Center and what we are doing in the space of curriculum, of programs, and things of that nature. The Cyber Innovation Center was founded back in 2007, ultimately as a workforce development and economic development engine. We quickly realized that not only near our headquarters, which is in northern Louisiana, and apologize in advance if I say y'all 3 times, 4 times in one sentence, what we'll do in developing the Cyber Innovation Center, what we've done is we've really realized that we don't have a workforce that is geared towards filling all of these great jobs that are available. I read a report, the number has increased today. There are 370,000 cyber and cybersecurity jobs available, yet we don't have the workforce to fill it. So we really started, thinking, how in the world do we solve this issue? And through research, through analysis, we really realized answer is simple, and it starts in K-12 education. How do we build that foundation in K-12 that prepares students for the community college level, for the university level, and ultimately for the workforce? Because a student coming out of high school that has an understanding and a foundation of what IT fundamentals, network plus, security plus, A plus, all of those fundamental skills that are needed to take those certification classes, those students are primed for jobs, whether it's out of high school, whether it's out of college. And so many of us really define this pipeline as a term. We kind of take a different approach to it in our curriculum and in our efforts. We like to think of it as an interstate. An interstate with multiple on-ramps and multiple off-ramps. For students who are not college-bound, you know, and there's a lot of parents out there going, my student's going to college, my student's going to college. Well, the reality is, you know, not everyone is college-bound, but everyone is bound to a great career, a successful lifestyle, a good, productive citizen in our country. And so, once you leave high school, that off-ramp, we want to make sure students are prepared. And whether it's through the community college, whether it's through dual enrollment, whether it's through those industry-based certifications, that's our ultimate call. Whether it's through college, when they really dive into the meat and the nuts and the bolts of computer science and preparing them for those, again, jobs that are postgraduate. That's our call. So we've built this interstate, we've built this robust curriculum for students to be re-engaged. That's kind of the next topic in the next area of fun discussion. What is the next generation learner like? I tell you, when I was in school, it's far different than today. When each of us were in school, it's far different than today. We've gone from a chalk and chalkboard philosophy to, holy cow, what is this robot that's sitting in front of me, and what in the world do I do with it? You know, as an educator, so I'm a classroom teacher, I was a former assistant principal before I came on board, and I have colleagues who would see a box that has a robot in it, and they go, nope, I'm not touching that. Because for the last 20 years, my chalk has worked just fine. And it's like, oh, I know it has, but it's a different generation. It's a different generation, and what we as educators and business leaders and community officials, our obligation is to empower those teachers to feel comfortable in educating that next generation learner. So, just from my point, or in our company's perspective, what we're doing is we are transforming. We're giving the teachers the tools and the confidence to go in and target that next generation learner. Because those teachers ultimately are the key to a systemic and sustainable change in cyber education, in cybersecurity education. With that being said, we also do various camps and competitions. We have a robotics competition because anytime you throw the word competition into something, these kids are going to get all jazzed up and they're going to be motivated because you know what? This guy beat me on the football field. Our school has a great rivalry on Friday nights, but you know what? He's not beating me on Saturday morning at a robotics competition. I guarantee that. So it provides that competition for a different block of students. It gets them engaged, gets them ownership, and gets them jazzed about learning, because that's ultimately at the end of the day what it's all about. We also have residential camps and day camps that we have put together. And these residential camps really take a dive into cyber and cybersecurity. So at this time, I'm going to punch to Brian a little bit to kind of talk about cyber discovery and the things that we're doing in that space.
Sure, thanks, Kevin.
I'll drive this one. Okay. I'm going to pull up our whip.
I alluded to it earlier. It's been in existence since 2008. It's currently, or it has been, historically funded the last few years by a grant to the Cyber Innovation Center through the Department of Homeland Security. And the idea behind it, there are two things that I think really make it, at that time, I think other programs are catching up, but made it different and significant from some of the other efforts to grow the cybersecurity pipeline. The first is that it targeted both high school teachers and high school students. So it was college faculty working with teams of high school teachers and high school students in a residential camp setting. There were a couple of professional development workshops that happened before the camp took place, but it was really about getting the teachers and the students in the same place. And that was key because the students that took part in these camps were almost like a proof of concept kind of thing, where the teachers saw how engaged they could be in the educational experience and were therefore inspired to take the curriculum that Kevin alluded to that was based on this project back to their classes and implement it in some form or fashion in an academic year effort. So that was one thing that distinguished it. The second is that the initiative is far more integrated and multidisciplinary than most, in the sense that it incorporates both STEM and non-STEM disciplines at both the collegiate and secondary level. And the idea, the organizing principle behind it is the notion of cyber citizenship. So the animating principle is that if we want to grow the pipeline of students interested in pursuing this as a field, we have to look outside of our traditional kind of catchment areas. I mean, there's a lot of money chasing students that have already been tracked into STEM or math disciplines. What about all those other kids that, for whatever reason, have come to believe that this is not really a field for them because they're not math kids? You know, they think they're more language arts kids or social studies kids. We wanted to try and re-engage those students. So we did that by stipulating that every participating high school had to include a STEM and a non-STEM teacher, and the student composition had to be both STEM and non-STEM, and the college faculty that actually conducted the camp, constructed and conducted the camp were drawn from STEM and non-STEM disciplines as well. So it is, in the context of higher education, it's aggressively interdisciplinary because we have folks on our team that are computer scientists and engineers, but also philosophers, ethicists, political scientists, sociologists, historians, literature professors, film scholars, theater professors, you name it. They run the gamut, and they're all providing instruction around this central theme of what does it mean to be a citizen in the digital age. And so there are three primary threads that happen during the week-long residential experience. There's one around programming or coding that involves our Bobot platform. We found that the students, even students that had no experience whatsoever with programming, if they could get something to move within an hour, were hooked, and they wanted to stay engaged in discipline or in lessons that became increasingly complex, where they were asking the robots to do increasingly more complicated things. So that's one thread. The second is a cryptographic treasure hunt that is threaded with lessons in cryptography, and then they apply those lessons to find a treasure on the college campus where it's being hosted, and those clues get progressively more difficult as the week goes along as well. And the third is liberal arts or humanities and social studies thread, where those faculty from those disciplines talk about issues associated with privacy, the ethics of autonomous systems, of communication systems and how they've evolved over time. So the idea is that by approaching cyber from all of these different perspectives, students who may have previously thought of themselves as not really geared for this kind of field could see the relevance of it to them, and the teachers could as well. So we've been doing this for several years. It started in Louisiana. It has grown, it was able to grow with federal funding to communities in Maryland, Oregon, Michigan, and Arkansas. Thank you. So we have had iterations of this camp experience on all of those, on campuses in all of those different communities. And you know, GB would have all the data on the assessments, but I can say from my experience in doing it, working with college faculty and high school teachers in many of these different communities, and in seeing some of the results as they come in, it's been very successful engaging students and teachers in thinking about this as not only something to incorporate in their classes or perhaps in their life work, but also to become an advocate for it with other people. I mean, it's remarkable to see an English professor at a high school saying, you know what, you really need to think about computer science. You really need to think about this. But by bringing everyone together and seeing the role that everyone can play in preparing this workforce, it can be really powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Some of the stats that we've seen, you know, granted you can't track students, right? It's the big no-no, but we've seen an increase in our enrollment in our local university of 39% in the engineering and sciences field. Of that 39% increase, there's been a 40% female participation in that. So minorities, the females, they're getting involved, and like Brian alluded to earlier, it's a liberal arts connection in the context for the content where we are getting the vast majority of people jazzed about these things. So wanted to kind of backtrack 1 second and really kind of give you a concept of what we're saying cyber is. And cyber security, as it's tossed around at this conference, really to us is like a well-written essay. And we feel it is our responsibility to make sure before a student writes that well-written essay, that we've got to teach them the alphabet first. And so taking the STEM fundamentals, taking the liberal arts fundamentals, tying it all together, encapsulating it in a camp or a competition, prepares them for when they do hit that community college, do hit that university, that they know what in the world they want to do. You know, the $1 million question for every student is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're going to say doctor, you're going to say fireman, you're going to say veterinarian. You know, until the kid comes up to me and goes, Mr. Nolan, I'm not a whole lot, you know, I'm not really sure what all my options are. You're right. You're right. So what are we doing at that level to prepare them? So speaking on the community college level, I want to invite Stephen to kind of offer his perspective on education and his involvement at the community college level.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. As a community college, we are in the middle of that pathway that Brian and Kevin mentioned earlier. On one end is the K through 12 program, at the other end is the four-year college and the workforce. So we have to position ourselves right in the middle to pull in students from one end and then push them on out at the other end. So initially in our county, cybersecurity is fairly new as a topic. It was hard getting K through 12 students to come into the program because we only really had one school, the technical high school, that would address these issues and then have their students come in and further education with us. Anyone else, it was hard to talk about. It's like Kevin said, it's like, well, I don't know anything. I don't have any other choices. I'm going to go through the traditional doctor, lawyer. Not many of them said computer engineer. But over the past couple years, the curriculum, thanks to CyberWatch and many other factors, it's filtering down into the K through 12. So how we can address that at the community college level is the more informal, what this session is talking about. We can reach out to the high schools and middle school and help them, say, with clubs, have activities at a club for after school. Or we could run summer camps. Or we could run, at our college, we run what we call institutes, summer institutes, where we get teachers in one institute, students in another, and have a summer program with them. We're also a member of CyberWatch, and we were able to acquire a couple NSF grants, and they encourage us to reach out also to the high schools and middle schools, and also go after a underserved population, the girls. It's hard to get the girls. Like your mention of 40% is like, wow, if we could get that. So we're seeking out programs to help us in that area. Develop this model. It's available on the internet. Some of you are teaching at high schools, some of you are teaching at middle schools. Davina does great work in documentation, so she has samples of all of these. She has presenter packet kits available to you. She has teacher packet kits available to you. So these are all off of the internet. So I think Carrie here is, she worked at DISA at the time, the Defense Information Security Agency. I think her topic is steganography and cryptography. Again, that's a small size. Davina has found that 8 to 10 work well, and then they rotate after about 20 minutes. So there might be like 4 rotations, 5 rotations in the program. They start off the day with creating a scenario, maybe based on a real event, but modified so it would hold the girls' interest. Then presenting that and using that to springboard for the different activities at each of the different tables. Then at lunchtime, they have each of the women professionals get up and talk for 10, 15 minutes and have an open Q&A session while the girls eat a box lunch. Then they wind up with a summary of their findings, what they found, what they learned, and then they fill out the evaluations. And then they head back to their school, middle school. So there's the lock-picking one. That one was interesting. Davina just assigned that to me and said, okay, learn lock-picking. I said, you gotta be kidding. So but it's all based on soda cans. The kids can, you see the scissors there. She had a template that you get 2 or 3 of these little picks out of a soda can, and it actually works. I was actually able to open some of these locks. One girl said, my father's a state police, should you be teaching us this? Yeah, there's a model there. I was one of 2 males in the whole room. There were about 80 girls and like about 20 staff that ran that. Sylvia, if you want to throw anything in at this point, I think you're in here.
Yeah, that's the one I attended. We also had physical security. So the nice thing about security is that no matter where you are, whether you're a lawyer or a nurse or whatever, all paths lead to security. And so one of the items that we were working on this workshop was physical security. How you can pretty much, there I am, where we can pretty much, steal information through thumb drives. We had little purses that contained multiple things, and the thumb drives were masked in different things. So it could have been a coin that you couldn't even tell, different things that it was pretty cool. So I knew what it was, but to see the girls figuring out which one was a thumb drive and how they could potentially steal information and the size and all of that, it was very, very exciting. So it is true accurate, I should say, that girls do open up when there are more girls and when the sizes are not big. So 8 to 10, it's a good number. Yeah.
One of the programs, I'll kind of piggyback on that, one of the programs we're working with the Girl Scouts, doing kind of engaging them in a lot of STEM activities, and you're spot on. And it's just seeing them get excited, engage, and involved in the conversation is something very, very exciting to see. Yes.
We went to this a couple of years ago. It wasn't in Hagerstown. It was I can't think of the location, but it was about 3 years ago. We took 8th and 9th grade. We took our middle school, our feeder school, with us, and I took a group of 9th grade girls. We met the middle school girls there, and it was good for our program because it got them interested. Even though in our program we only start in 10th grade, it was good to get those 8th and 9th grade girls, and like you said, in that small atmosphere, get them involved in this kind of learning and just to kind of bring that potential, out of them that they, I'm sure, didn't even know was there. So it was very exciting, very informative. The girls had a great time. It's a great time. It's about 3 years ago.
Right. And I also might add that the girls were encouraged to, while they were at the table with the woman professional, is to get their insight. How did they start? How did they get involved into that? And they, I don't know if you want to address that. I thought that was a very positive thing, to see a female worker in that area, and then they can share with them, ask them their own questions.
Some didn't know how to get into computers or even security. They didn't know, so there were different women professionals that somehow got into, whether it was engineering, computer science, security, forensics, different ways, either from high school, what triggered for them to become interested. All those things that I think that their minds just expanded because they didn't know that it would be that easy. Or there was an example of someone who got interested just because they took this seminar or something along the lines in high school, not even a course. So things like that, just to see their excitement and how doable it is, that it's not a guy's career type thing, that it's not that hard. It was nice.
So, any other questions? You know, we have 15 minutes left in this session. Any questions from the education side, or the K-12 education side, from the community college side?
I have a question. So I agree that cybersecurity needs to start from the ground up, from kindergarten. I have my children. Some are high schoolers, 2 are high schoolers, and 2 are little ones, second grade and kindergarten.
Right.
They're interested. They have a tablet, they have their phones, and all of that. So it is critical for them to understand, well, you have this, but how do you protect against it? What can you share? What can you not share? So, my kids are fortunate because both my husband and I are security professionals. Now, how can we, for instance, those 2 programs, one of the things that I hear from other parents is how much would it cost? Things are expensive. So my question is, for those that will need to learn something that it's not that intuitive, so I've heard camps and that sort of thing, how do you reach out to the communities, to those parents, families that may not be able to afford something? And I don't even know what's the price range anyway.
Right, so I'll kind of quickly answer, then I'll let them do it. From our perspective, it's going to the school systems. And it's making sure that administrators and educators are versed, equipped to make sure that the students, no matter what your background is, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, we're going to the educators to make sure that they have tools that can teach the children on a large scale.
I mean, I think I would say, part of the reason why we structured things the way that we did in our initiative is, well, it's kind of twofold. So focusing on cyber citizens, on the one hand, it allowed us to bring in a whole bunch of folks that have been kind of excluded from this conversation because the disciplines are not historically associated with cybersecurity. So even though it makes sense that a law professor would have a vested interest in this debate around what the digital world looks like and how what the law should be on it. Most of these kind of conferences, they're not invited to the table, same political scientists and sociologists and those types. So getting re-engaging those people and those high school teachers and those students that are kind of leaning that way, we thought was a kind of a nice strategic tactical move. The other thing, though, I think is, in terms of security, part of being a citizen in the digital age is the awareness that the Internet of everything, the interconnectedness of everything, every user is a vulnerability. I think that's something that's been emphasized very well in the morning workshop that I attended. Your Wi-Fi in your home is a major vulnerability, not just for you, but for your place of work. So I think at a base level, part of what every citizen in our country needs to know for the 21st century is how to safeguard their own digital space so they can therefore protect the larger one. And I think having that as a foundation and then building up from there those students that want to become even more engaged in the defense of the infrastructure. But I think that there has to be a very low level, but robust enough that every user knows that they are a potential vulnerability, and that they can unwittingly play a role in causing great harm to their place of work, to their community, and potentially to their nation. So I think so I would kind of see it as being, and that's something that everybody can take part in. You don't have to have a lot of money to do that. That's just kind of being aware, that kind of hygiene issue. But then I do think that we really, the need is so great, we need to be mindful of how we align our resources to make sure that we really are capturing all the talented kids out there, regardless of socioeconomic circumstance. And that's a much larger policy issue. But we've done this camp that's involved inner city Baltimore schools, and there's some very talented kids in those systems, but because of their circumstance, if they don't have these kind of programs that can intervene and identify them and give them the resources they need, that talent's going to be lost.
So you want to add
Yeah, I
anything?
agree with Brian that since you're addressing or want to address the kids, you got to link to the school system. So I would talk with your school systems. You're Maryland, you're Montgomery, you're Maryland. I understand that there's a cyber grant that went to every county in Maryland, or one, I don't know what that county is, but there should be a community college in your county in Maryland that has a grant to disperse cybersecurity throughout, and they're going to be doing outreach too. So, and it's to our students' advantage if they reach out to the schools. They get a lot of benefit out of that too, in working with them. And the kids like working with someone in that age group, not old folks like me. They would enjoy someone in the 20s. And then each school is different. Like, one of the schools we have in our county had a club, period, throughout the week, 2 or 3 times a week. So one of the teachers contacted me, and I would go out to that school at that time period, and we'd have a cybersecurity club and go through that. After school is something we would like to do with people competitions, or something we'd like to do with some of the schools. So we're targeting a few of the schools that came to the Teacher Institute, and we want to get something going with their schools and then expand upon that.
Selfish plug here is we're funded through a grant that Cyber Innovation Center is as well, and all of our curriculum is free to K-12 teachers. You go on there, download it, and it has cybersecurity points, it's got lesson plans that really guide that teacher that is, someone like me when I was in the classroom of going, I don't know, I'm not sure how to dabble in cybersecurity. It's spelled out right there. And I know educators do not like the word turnkey solutions, but when you find those turnkey solutions, make sure you